Good evening. I'm John Yang. Iran is bracing for global sanctions over its nuclear program to go back in place. The measures threaten to cripple Iran's economy. Their currency is at a record low, and ordinary Iranians are struggling to get the food they need to survive. The UN Security Council rejected a last-ditch effort to delay the sanctions after negotiations with European nations failed to reach a deal. Barring some sort of last-minute diplomatic breakthrough, the renewed sanctions will freeze Iranian assets abroad, penalize any development of Iran's ballistic missile program, and ban the sale or transfer of conventional weapons. Frontline correspondent Sebastian Walker conducted an exclusive interview earlier this week with Ali Larijani, head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Seb, he previewed for you Iran's reaction to these sanctions going back in place. Let's listen to what he had to say.
اول مسئله اسنپبک باید حل بشه تا بعد به این سوال شما پاسخ بدیم.
It's conditional.
بله وقتی که اونا اینطور در مقابل ما بایستن و به زور بخوان یه قطعنامه‌های علیه ما انجام بدن، ما دلیلی نمی‌بینیم که با آژانس رابطه متعارفی داشته باشیم.
Tell us more. Who is Ali Larijani and why is this so significant?
So he is the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Now, this is the body that essentially has the say over foreign policy decisions, head of the security apparatus, and also strategy over the nuclear program. So essentially, he's the chief negotiator. What he says is extremely significant. This is a very rare conversation. This is the first time that he has spoken to foreign media since his appointment. It's also the first interview that he's given since the 12-day conflict with the US and Israel. And the timing of this, just in the lead up to everything that we've heard at the UN and this deadline for the sanctions to come back, made this a very, very interesting conversation to have.
You also asked him to react to the U.S. claims that attack by the United States and Israel obliterated their nuclear program.
President Trump has said that the enrichment facilities targeted were completely and totally obliterated. Is he right?
از خودشون بپرسیدشون اعلام کردن که خلبانای ما خیلی رشید بودن، شجاع بودن، اومدن بمباران کردن و موفق بودن. دیگه حرف ایشونو نادیده نگیرین.
What's your assessment of the extent to which these sites have been damaged and how much this has set back Iran's nuclear program?
ارزیابی خیلی دقیقی ندارم تو این زمینه، ولی به نظر من هیچ وقت برنامه هسته ایران رو نمیتونن از بین ببرن. چون وقتی شما صاحب یک تکنولوژی شدید، اینا نمیتونن از بین ببرن. این مثل این که شما مخترع دستگاهی باشید، این دستگاه رو از شما بدزدن. شما باز میتونید بسازید.
What was your takeaway from that answer?
Well, this is obviously at the heart of what's going on with this question over whether UN inspectors should be allowed back in or not. Iran wants to preserve as much mystery as they can about the extent of the damage. This is what everyone wants to know. Did these strikes succeed in degrading Iran's enrichment facilities? Were the US strikes on Natanz, Fordo, Esfahan sufficient enough to set back the program? We asked for access to these facilities. We were pushing as hard as we possibly could on the ground to get any filming done of any of the strikes where the US missiles hit. We were told that was impossible, and you heard from Mr. Larijani there that they don't think that the bombed sites should be open to UN inspectors. This is something that he said really is conditional on the sanctions not being reimposed. He was saying essentially if these sanctions come back, then they will end their participation with the IAEA. And you're seeing signs of that already. Iran has recalled its ambassadors from Germany, France, the UK for consultations. He warned about the consequences of these actions and that Iran could withdraw from these negotiations as a result. So, I mean, we pushed him on, a number of questions that I think international observers have about the impact of these attacks. We asked him, where is Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, more than 400 kilos of HEU that Iran says is buried under rubble. International observers want to know where that is, and we asked him for information about that. none was forthcoming. So again, the takeaway overall is that Iran really is trying to kind of preserve whatever mystery it can about the extent of the damage. That's one of the few tools that they really have left after this devastating war that's taken place.
And you also asked him about the possibility of more U.S. attacks.
What's your message to the Trump administration if there are more attacks? What will be the consequences of that?
پیامی ما به دولت ترامپ نداریم، فقط میگیم که مراقب حرف زدنتون باشید که نسبت به ملت ایران توهین‌آمیز حرف نزنید. وقتی ایشون میگه ایران باید تسلیم بشود، مثل که ملت ایران رو نمیشناسه.
Do you get the sense that they're worried about more attacks either from the United States or from Israel?
I think there's definitely a worry about that. The attacks, I mean, we were able to travel around the country to places that were targeted. We didn't see the US strike sites, but we were able to visit locations where Israel had eliminated some of Iran's leading nuclear scientists, places in Tehran that had been bombed, apartment buildings. There's a real apprehension on the part of Iranians that we met that more strikes could be coming down the road. There was, alarm about how much had happened during this war. The 12-day conflict really showed Iran's weaknesses to a lot of ordinary people, that these scientists could be eliminated so effectively. And I think spending time in the country, while we weren't able to really have a kind of truly authentic engagement with Iranians that we met. You're very highly monitored, controlled everywhere you go. It's very challenging as a reporter to report from Iran. But there is a sense that these strikes have really kind of had a huge impact. The Iranian currency is at a record low. The news of the sanctions coming back, I think, is incredibly worrying for a lot of ordinary Iranians. And it's just something that I think is, we're really now at a point where anything could happen next. The sanctions coming back in puts Iran into a place where the engagement with the international community is now unclear. You heard from Mr. Larijani there saying that they are going to withdraw from participation with the IAEA. And I think that begs the question, what are going to be the consequences of that? What are the US and Israel going to do next?
Frontline correspondent Sebastian Walker, thank you very much. Sebastian's exclusive interview will be part of an upcoming documentary for PBS's Frontline in collaboration with The Washington Post.